Thanks to all of you who took the poll on my community page. Elgin's top of the line size 18 open face pocket watch is the Veritas. Now Veritas is a strange name for a pocket watch, but stick to the end of this video and we'll find out why they called it Veritas. Now the grade number that Elgin gave this watch was 214, and it had 23 ruby jewels, and it was the first railroad watch produced by Elgin that had the 23 jewels. Now this watch had all the requirements that met railroad specifications for a watch, and then some. It had gold gears in the train, which we'll go into further into the watch when we look at the back of it. It had raised gold settings. It had, of course, the ruby jewels, and it also even had a diamond cap jewel, which we'll talk about later in the video. Also, this watch was adjusted to the highest degree of precision for railroad timekeeping. Now, accuracy was very important for the railroad company, but at the end of the video I'm going to show you another accurate railroad watch, but right now we're going to talk about this one, the Veritas. So the first thing we want to talk about is this dial. And when my wife first saw I showed this watch to my wife, she said, "Wow, that's a busy looking dial." And I agree with her, but it is kind of it's a rare dial. It's rare because you don't see this kind of number set up usually on an American pocket watch for the American Railroad, and that goes to tell me that this was probably a Canadian railroad watch. Now, one thing I'd like you to notice are these little numbers that are on the outside edge of the dial, the 1 through 60. Now this style of dial was invented and patented by a man by the name of Henry Montgomery, and a lot of people call it the Monty dial, and he called it the safety number watch dial. And Elgin even used this as an advertisement. They called it a dial that almost speaks the time. It was quite popular with all railroad men, and all the major watch companies offered this dial. Now, since Montgomery held a patent to that dial, all those watch companies had to pay him royalties to use that dial. Now let's focus on those numbers on the inner ring. Those are the 13 through 24. Those are called 24-hour numbers, and there was a requirement for the Canadian railroad watches, and sometimes they referred to them instead of 24 hours as the afternoon hours. Now this type of dial is sometimes referred to as the Canadian dial, and in 1886 the Canadian Pacific Railroad Company required that all their watches have that 24-hour markers in the center, and they even furnished a sticker, a paper sticker that you could put on the older watches that didn't have that, so that they would be up to standards. And what the standards, all that meant was the railroads had a certain requirement that their watches had to meet in order to be used in railroad service, and so that was part of their standard. Well, not long afterwards, other Canadian railroad companies adopted that 24-hour type dial too. Well, now that we got all those different numbers out of the way, let's focus on these two hands here. We have the blue one and the red one, and what these were used for is if your train that you were working on went into two different time zones, say you went from Eastern Standard Time into Mountain Time, you wouldn't have to change the time on your watch. Now these were hands were primarily used in the Canadian Railroad. The only American railroad that I found that was allowed on was the Santa Fe Railroad. Well, now I'm just comparing the two Montgomery dials. The one on the right would be typical used in the American railroads, and then the one on the left would be typically used on the Canadian Railroad. You notice the American one only has a 1 hour hand, where the Canadian has 2, and the American one doesn't have the 24-hour markers in the center. Okay, while we're on the subject of dials, there's a tip I want to give you that kind of important thing to know is that the Veritas dial is different from the regular size 18 dial that's on the Elgin Pocket Watch. And so maybe you find a Veritas 18 size pocket watch that has a really beat up dial, and you're saying, hey, I'll just buy that watch and put a new dial. I've got a nice size 18 dial pocket watch. Well, you can see those little things that I'm pointing to. Those are called dial feet. And if you'll notice, on the right is a 18 Elgin Veritas dial, and the one on the left is a regular size 18 pocket watch dial, and they won't fit. One thing is the dial feet are located in different positions, and also that Veritas dial is just a little bit smaller, and the holes for the hour hands and the holes for the second hand won't match up. And the dial feet go in these little holes that I'm pointing to on this watch, on this movement. And trust me, I found out the hard way that they don't fit, because I bought one that had a really beat up dial, and I had a dial from a previous other watch, and I was like, oh, I'll just put this one on here, but it doesn't work. And sometimes that Veritas dial, if you go to try to find one on eBay or anywhere, you might end up spending as much for that dial as you do just for the movement. So just to let you know that and save you a little bit of money and heartache. Now you can see right where I'm pointing, that dial foot is off from that hole that it's supposed to go into, so it's pretty far off. There's no way you're going to get that dial to fit. Okay, now let's look under the hood and see what's going on with all the gears and the jewels of this pocket watch. Wow, that gold embedded train really stands out on this silver case. Wow, look at all that engraving. What a piece of artwork. All that engraving is called damaskeening, and it was done with by hand with it was called a rose engine lathe, and it was all done by hand. And in Europe it's called Geneva stripes. But it's just, they just don't make things like that. And the funny thing is that most people that own the watch never open the back of it to see all this. There's that engraving is even under parts that you wouldn't see. Only the watchmaker would actually see it when he took the watch apart. So now we're going to look at the jewels of this pocket watch. This pocket watch had 23 jewels, and like I said before in the beginning, this was the first 23 jewel pocket watch that Elgin made. And these jewels were made of ruby. Now, they weren't gem grade rubies, they were industrial grade. And this is a diamond. They had a diamond end cap on the balance, had one on the top part of the balance, and then underneath the balance plate they had a diamond there too, and these were called cap jewels. So here's a little diagram I drew up to try to explain what a cap jewel is. You have your gear, you have your shaft on the end of your gear, and it pokes through the jewel that's on the plate. The plate is on the top and the bottom, and then you have your cap jewel set on top of the bottom jewel, and it has a little reservoir that you put your oil in. There's several purposes for the cap jewel, to help hold that oil in there, but it also the cap jewel is sealed so there no dirt or contaminants can get into the shaft and slow down your watch and cause friction. Now the cap jewels were usually just on the balance, and also sometimes they were on the escapement to help protect it too. Also, it had gold gears. That gear that I'm pointing to is just one of the many gears that are underneath these plates, and these were all gold. You only find those in really high grade movements. Now here's a close-up of one of the ruby jewels that's in this watch. And the outer ring is gold. It's made of gold, and it's a raised setting. That means it sets up a little high, and sometimes they were called smokestacks. And the purpose of the raised setting was to help hold the oil that you put into the reservoir when you were oiling your watch. You could see taking the little oiler, putting a tiny drop of oil on the top of it, and that's a little reservoir that holds that oil, and the oil is to reduce the friction. Well, even the hairspring on this Elgin was different. Elgin made that hairspring for this Veritas a little bit thicker and more heavy duty. I guess they wanted to make it a little bit more robust so it could withstand the tortures of railroad service. Okay, let's compare two of Elgin's 18 size pocket watches. The one on the left is called a full plate. As you notice, the top of it doesn't have any splits in it, and it's one solid piece of metal. And the one on the right, that's our Veritas, and you can see how it's cut up into sections, and that was called a 3/4 plate. Now the good thing about the 3/4 plate was that the balance would sit down inside the plates lower than on the full plate. The full plate, the balance cock and the balance wheel set up high. With the 3/4 plate, it made the watch, you can make the watch thinner versus the full plate watch that's on the left, where the balance sets on top of the plate, and that made the watch thicker. And also, by using the 3/4 plates, you were able to make your mainspring barrel larger, and Elgin put a larger mainspring in this Veritas, so the Veritas ran on a full wind, it would run 36 hours, whereas most pocket watches only ran 24 to 28 hours. So in the 1910 article I saw for advertisement for the Veritas, it cost $50 back then, and I did a calculation of today's money. That would be $1,500. But I doubt if they could even build this pocket watch for that type of money. It would probably cost in the $3,000, $4,000 just to produce this pocket watch with all the craftsmanship that went into it. So why did Elgin call this pocket watch Veritas anyways? Well, Veritas is the Latin for truth, and in their advertisement they state that with the Veritas you have the truth in time every time you check your watch. Listen, accurate pocket watches were a big deal, especially in the railroad industry. A lot of times it meant the difference between life and death. So here's another accurate pocket watch that you might not have heard of. Learn about it here.